What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Friday show, gang. Here to break down a little 3-game NBA slate. Nothing crazy tonight. Should breeze on through it. It's been a couple days. Unscheduled off day from shows yesterday, but we went, my hat's a little crooked. We went full content as usual at the site, of course. Projections, all of that was live at the site, but just couldn't get my act together for a show yesterday. Woke up just feeling a little tired, under the weather. Don't know what it was. Had a few beers the night before, but I don't think it was that. I didn't have that many. But yeah, we missed yesterday's show, but a couple days off for the NBA, or Wednesday was off. We had the one-gamer on Tuesday. So it's been a minute, but we're like bookending the week here with NBA shows anyway. Happy holidays to you too, Millie. Good to see you, buddy. Doug's here. Doug Geely, what's up, buddy? Tiz, good to see you. We'll wave back at you. So kind of a slow week around here, but we've got Saturday football in action tomorrow. Got to get those projections up on the site this evening. I'll have the full NFL main slate Sunday projections up, not too much later in the night after that. I'll start to grind away, chisel away at the monolith that is the massive effort to get the groups and optimizers and game notes article together. I'll get that all started and in place tonight. The rankings will all be up. We've got NHL tonight. We've got a 7-game NHL slate, I want to say. Those projections went up before basketball today. NHL's been friendly this week. Not too many crazy line changes, although my Rangers made a big trade. Poor Capo Caco, the scapegoat, sent to Seattle. Anthony Taylor, what's going on, buddy? Happy holidays to you, too. Michael Knack. Yeah, speaking of holidays, anticipating, a few days next week where content will be live, projections will be live. Like I said, Christmas Day, I'll be on top of NBA at least through till the, lock of the, let's say, whatever the 5:30. I haven't looked at the schedule yet. That kind of territory. Around dinner time, let's say. And then I'll have here's the situation. These are the projections. I'll give you any, indications I can, but I'll be out of pocket for a few hours on the night of Christmas Day. Otherwise, be on top of everything projections and content-wise as usual over the next week and change through next weekend with the holidays. Shows will be intermittent. We'll definitely, I'm going to say, maybe not even Monday because Christmas Eve is Tuesday. Wow, that snuck up on me. Depending on what Monday looks like for my schedule as far as being traveling down to my parents' house, because it's just difficult to do shows from there like on my laptop, but we'll see what we can do. So stay tuned. That's where I get hit the subscribe button down there so that you know when shows go live. I will try my best to get a Monday the 23rd show in. And then I'd love to try and land something, even if it's doing it from their house, to do like this is what the Christmas Day slate is going to look like. No promises. Maybe it becomes an article, right? Maybe that's how I'll handle it in lieu of shows. Maybe I'll pop a couple articles up on the site or top 5 via Sims kind of things and everything. Speaking of the Sims, you guys are staring at it. We've got a 100% owned Vasily Micic on the FanDuel slate, 96% owned on the DraftKings slate. It's funny, I ran it. He came up 99.8% or something. He was not in one lineup. And I was like, I could arguably had his projection a point or two high, so I lowered it by a point or two. I reran it. He came up 100% of the time, so it was just happenstance. He just looks like a tremendous value today. We'll get into that. But a 3-gamer, as we get started here, hit the like and the subscribe button. Again, you're going to need to know when we go live over the next few days if you want to catch any shows. But let's talk game environments. Let's talk insies, outsies. Charlotte at Philly. Philly favored by 12.5 in a home game. Charlotte missing a whole bunch of pieces. No Miller, no LaMelo. Ongoing, no Man, no Mark Williams. It's a big messy day for Charlotte. 213.5 point total there. On the Philly side, assuming Embiid plays, it looks somewhat straightforward, and Embiid's getting boxed out of any kind of star shares outside of, let's see, actually. Yeah, FanDuel, he's getting boxed out. DraftKings, he's 9,500. So we are getting some of them over there, but we're getting a massive share on both sites of Giannis, who you can see hiding up at the top there. Or not hiding up at the top, prominently up at the top. So Giannis is coming up as our big star right now. That game is a game they're visiting Cleveland. There's no Dame in that one. So that's pushing a ton in Giannis's direction, and some of the other Bucks as well are going to be looking pretty good from the mid-range. Going up against a pretty good Cavs team, though, and the Cavs are favored by 9 in a home game, 221-point total on that one. Cavs kind of looking like who they are kind of spot, but I expect we'll see them on such a small slate. And then the last game of the night, OKC at Miami, 217-point total in that one. 1-point game, OKC favored on the road, but kind of a close spread. All three of these games pretty light in the point total department. The 221 is the highest on the board. Pieces and parts at worst from OKC and Miami. And, here's Bam. We've got a decent chunk of him on both sites. A lot of guys from OKC are going to end up coming up. So on a 3-gamer, we're going to mix and match our way around these just monster shares of a few guys that we got. Delon Wright, another one, picking up a ton of value from Milwaukee with no Dame. Talking about the ins and the outs. Questionable. Joel Embiid, big one there. Max Strus, medium impact. Nikola Jovic and Pele Larson are both also questionable, medium impact at like the bottom end of Miami's rotation. Giannis and Chris Middleton are both probable. All signs point to them playing. And then out, LaMelo, Trey Mann, Brandon Miller, Grant Williams, Mark Williams, Nick Smith Jr., Caleb Martin, Jared McCain, Damian Lillard, Isaac Okoro, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, and Josh Richardson is doubtful. Nice clean little list, though. Short slate. Doug won the $10 2001 Bulls vs. Raptors showdown the other day with Josh Giddey in the MVP spot, who got hurt in the third quarter. Not even that's awesome. Yeah, Greg, I think it will. I think it'll be great for Kako. I just really like him as a player. I hate giving up a second overall pick who's still 23, but it obviously wasn't working. Yet another failure by the Rangers player development department, which is just weird. It's been years and years, and they developed Fox, and people overlook some of the very good successes they've had, several goaltenders, so on and so forth. But a lot of the wings that they take just don't tend to work out, and that definitely happened with Kako. Fortunately, it looks like Laffy's kind of over the top, and he's there, even if he's not going to be the a number one superstar that people maybe thought he was going to be. At least he's there. But yeah, the Kaka, it's just unfortunate how it works out, but it seems like they're in for a retool. I mean, there's a lot of rumors that they're going to be selling off more parts. So, should be interesting. But anyway, let's dig in here. So, again, starting just from the top, I fully expect Micic to be jumping in for major minutes here. I've got him at 32. We've seen him pop into this spot before. It's really prominent today, though, because any way you slice it, you have to give him a little bit of credit for some production. In this situation, no LaMelo, no Brandon Miller, no Trey Mann. He's been this year in a very small sample, 63 minutes over 128 possessions in that scenario. He's been a 1+ player, 1.03 per minute on the DraftKings scale, 0.98 per minute on the FanDuel scale. Tiny sample, I agree with you. If we extend it back and include all of last year, which obviously, bit of a different configuration overall. But if you do that, it becomes a 225-minute sample, 442 possessions, over which he's a 1.02 per minute player. As you'll note, 29.3 against 32 minutes, I did not give him 1.02 or 1.03 here, and we're getting him 100% of the time. Now, for the season, he's been a 0.80 DraftKings player, 0.74, but that is across all normal situations. The idea of him improving at least upon the 0.80, which isn't exactly crazy to do and jump from 0.80 to 0.9, is right in front of us. And he's done it in this situation. So I think it's an easily defensible value position. Do you have to lock it like this? No, it's not Scotty Barnes from yesterday, but he's the most highly owned player on the FanDuel slate by far. I believe he's the most highly owned player on the DraftKings slate as well. It's just more dramatically above the field on DraftKings than it is on FanDuel, as you can see. But I've got him on DraftKings at 0.93. So I took a tenth of a point off the number that he's been putting up in this situation over the 200 and change minutes over the last year plus, 400 plus possessions. I took it down by a full tenth of a point. That brings us back into this kind of territory, improved by a tenth of a point, which I think is realistic. It's essentially splitting the difference on who he's been this year versus who he's been in this situation over the last year plus. If you want less of it, it's very easy. All you have to do is essentially take like 2 points off. And I think that puts him in it's still above what he's done this year, but only slightly. And it's only really reflecting the minute situation and a minor uptick. But I think it's right there for Micic. He's failed us already a number of times in this spot this season. So it's not the most comfortable thing to recommend, but it's staring us in the face at 4,000 point guard only on DraftKings and 4,200 point guard and shooting guard eligible on the FanDuel slate. Again, you do not have to lock him, but you should probably have a very big chunk because he's a big part of creating the path to Giannis. You've also got Seth Curry coming out of Charlotte. Curry played a random-ass 31.8 minutes last night. He's averaging 13 on the season over 25 games played. I gave him 28 today. I'm skeptical if he gets it. I think it's very, very fragile. But there's reason to believe with everybody being out that they do throw it back to him. So 3,600, it's not like he's projected through the roof. We're right at, technically we are at 0.70, not 0.69. But 0.70 is essentially you're an average rookie default number. And if Seth Curry goes out and knocks down a couple shots as a 3,000 flat min value guy on DraftKings, we got him 74% of the time. Ton of lineups. 3,600 on FanDuel. Ton of lineups. We're more above the field on DraftKings, again, than we are on FanDuel. Closer to the field on FanDuel at our 56. Let's see what that DraftKings number looks like. So we're a little better than 2x at our 74% there. But if you wanted to come down, if you were in the 50% range, you'd still be ahead of the field, but you wouldn't have nearly as big a position. And that's a dead min price player who's creating a lot of value around him. You've also got Delon Wright at the dead min price, though, with the same minutes projection at 28. He's 3,500 on FanDuel. He's getting into 78% of lineups there, 54% of lineups on the DraftKings slate because he's colliding a little bit with Seth Curry, where Curry's 100 more expensive on FanDuel. So it's really probably just getting a lot of both of them. But you're getting a little bit more Delon Wright on the FanDuel slate. Got to watch the starters with Milwaukee, but I'm expecting him to step into the starting role and a fair amount of minutes. We do have, let's see, there's Wright, there's Bobby Portis, there's Jackson, Middleton, Prince, Green, and Trent. Everybody with at least 3% popularity on DraftKings. A little bit more than that for some of these guys on FanDuel, but a little bit less. Like on Andre Jackson, you got 11% DraftKings, 3% FanDuel. So these guys are just price and positional fits, but everybody's got a little bit of potential today with the expectation of just, that's a big void of usage to go around. So there should be a reasonable uptick for most of those guys. But as you can see, a lot of them do kind of drop into the filler range. Some of them justifiably on just being bad per minute guys. Andre Jackson, 0.63 per minute FanDuel, 0.64 DraftKings. 0.66 on Taurean Prince. Chris Middleton just limited by minutes right now. The price isn't terrible, though, to grab $5,600 Chris Middleton at shooting guard, small forward. It doesn't have to do too much. It's just we've been getting 0.79, 0.82 so far from him in his 4 games at 21 minutes a night. But if he goes anywhere near this level, 1.11 last year, he becomes an immediately more interesting player, even in the low 20s for those prices. But still a little bit capped artificially by those minutes. And you got like AJ Green, 0.62, 0.67. Gary Trent, 0.57, 0.59. So that's why these guys aren't really exploding for value. Because not one of them is really a truly good per minute player. Brolo's right here. Way more Brolo on the FanDuel slate where you only get one bite at the center apple. Just one share of them on DraftKings. 53 versus 56 price-wise. I guess that makes sense. Get into a little bit more of an organized breakdown here. We'll go positionally as usual. No, Doug. Obviously, you think his name is Millard. Clearly, that wasn't just a typo. You can't correct that now. You get one shot at it. That's it. Doug thinks Dame Lillard's name is Millard. Last time he was out, Ryan Rollins started and played very well before a shoulder injury. I do remember that. Power saying in other suggestions, buy Honda and Nissan stock before the completion of the merger. Disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor. I did not know that Honda and Nissan were merging. Power gave out a Larry Nance pick to all kinds of people who gave him shit, and he made loot on it. Nice job, buddy. Nance can still get it done. I don't particularly remember the game they put up, but can still get it done when he gets a little bit of time. All right, so outside of the Charlotte guys at the top of the board, outside of Delon Wright at the top of the board, and, Wright is also in that bucket, by the way. 0.63 per minute FanDuel, 0.60 per minute DraftKings so far this year, but he's a 0.91 player last year. He is a guy who can spike better games. It's just been really limited, 9.8% usage so far this season. The 0.91 came on 12.7% usage. But he hasn't really hit shots in his limited appearances, 41.8% true shooting, just a 13.3% assist rate. But you expect better than that from Delon Wright when you get him in this kind of a situation. Tyler Hero looking like a not insignificant piece on both sides. We're a little bit below the field on both, 28% exactly on both sides, but looks like a very solid option from the mid-range. 28% under the field. 5.11 value score DraftKings, 4.56 on FanDuel. That's kind of unique, actually, because we are short of the mark while being closer to it on DraftKings for our value score. We're fairly far off the value mark that we're normally looking for, but that's the limitations of a 3-game slate. Look at the value column on FanDuel. That 4.56 plays really well against all these. It's just not quite those 3, and we're usually looking for 5. But that's one of our best values. At the 4.61 on SGA is an $11,000 player, so it's a different proposition. Same deal kind of with the 71 on Darius Garland, although Hero at 78. And we got 38% of Darius Garland. Garland is a different play across sites. 72%, 7,200, we got 16% on DraftKings. But yeah, Hero's looking like a good piece. I'm typically more inclined to chase Hero when one of Bam or Jimmy's not there, but Hero's having a good season. 1.08 per minute on FanDuel, 1.16 on DraftKings makes him more interesting overall for just the generally increased upside. Flexibility across both guard spots on FanDuel is helpful. Point guard only on DraftKings where it matters a little bit less. But a fairly high-end scoring option. 29-3 in 40.6 minutes the other day. A little bit of a disappointment to his usual production there. But even that, I mean, if you get a low-end game like that, you're not shot in the foot with only so many options to fill those spots. It's just we are a little bit below the field, so we're taking kind of a negative position on Hero. And directionally, if I was going to push it one way or the other, it is one of those spots to me where I don't know that I would go back to the field, right? You don't necessarily want to say, all right, let me get up to 32 wherever the field's at on both sites. And now I'm just comfortably with everybody and I don't miss out, but I don't gain ground. I think the direction to take it, if you're going to go away from where we're at, is to go a little lower. And 25, leave a little bit more on the table and go in different directions. But I kind of like our 28 here. 25, 28, I think is right where you want to be. Have a pretty decent chunk of them because good player on a short slate like this. SGA, we're getting plenty of them. 27% with all the value on DraftKings. That's a little bit below the field, but close to the field. He's 10,300 over there, point guard only. He's 11-1 point guard only on FanDuel. That's a 4.61 value score. We did get him, but we got him a little bit of a bigger undercut to the field on FanDuel than we did on DraftKings with our orange-colored down arrow there. But still, it's not a direct down. We're relatively close to the field. Let's see. And it's one of the few absolute rock-solid superstar players in the, approaching 1.5 kind of territory as far as a per-minute number. Field is at handful of points ahead of us. SGA is a player where absolutely, if you do take it back to the field, that's, I think, fine. Even though it's expensive, even though that is a player who needs to put, a very large score up to succeed, that's a guy you can always take more of the superstars. It applies to Giannis on this slate. It applies to SGA. Guy like Donovan Mitchell, a few spots further down, you could argue could qualify for that bucket sometimes, but there's a stark difference. 1, 2, 3 per minute out of him so far on DK this on FanDuel so far this season. 1.53 out of SGA so far. So there's a very, very big difference. It's also a very big price difference, though. Donovan Mitchell at 89, both guard spots on FanDuel. We got him 15% of the time, but a little bit light to the field. For 87 on DraftKings, point guard, shooting guard, same deal. 9%, a little bit light to the field. But that's another player who, at these numbers, I would probably be inclined to stay more in this territory, but I don't think it's a total mistake to just grab a few more shares on a short slate and put it in your pocket because he's such a good per minute player relative to the number of guys that are even above 1-2 on this slate, let alone the 1.5s of the world like SGA. Lou Dort is who he is, kind of a spot, 24% and a little bit of an undercut to the field, but close to the field's ownership on DraftKings for the 47. Shooting guard and small forward eligible. At 5,800 on FanDuel, I could walk away from Lou Dort shares. 0.82 per minute is fine. He is a good player. He does have a relative security of minutes around 30, but that's not a good value option. 3.87, we can do better. 4%, I'm happy to leave the field with their 10 or whatever. Have 4 and buy other options. Garland we touched on, but again, 38% FanDuel looking pretty good for the 71 there. The 72 on DraftKings doesn't work quite as well. Should have reasonable expectations for one of these guys at least from Cleveland, be it Garland, Mitchell, to a lesser extent LeVert. Just considering that we're going up against some understudies, kind of feeds the upside for at least one of these guys to do their thing scoring-wise. And I don't mind a cheap Darius Garland. That price is still appealing. Andre Jackson looking like a mix and match right now. It's at 0.63 per minute, 3,900. I've got him at 22 minutes. If the minutes shuffle around, though, you got to watch these value guys. So just keep an eye on what the numbers look like as far as minutes. If he jumps to like 26 minutes for 3,300, that's going to look more appealing. We did get him 11% of the time on DraftKings. For 39 on FanDuel, even if I give him another 4 or 5 minutes, it's not going to look quite as good. But the more minutes you give him on DraftKings, the more this would go up and up and approach field level ownership. Field's probably in the upper teens. If it's LeVert, I don't mind that option too. 6,200 on FanDuel, 5,200 on DraftKings most specifically. Both guard spots on DK. Really didn't get much of them on the FanDuel slate. 0.67 over there in our top 150, just one share. But on DraftKings, we got a little bit. It's just a cheap price for a 1.04 per minute player. We've obviously got some potential shakeup, though, as far as Cleveland goes. So we got to keep an eye on status on Max Strus. See if we got any news here. Saturday. Everything is Saturday. Elton John, right? That Saturday song. Let's see what else we got. Maxey, with everybody here for Philly, even against a weak opponent like Charlotte, 10%. I could see him having a very big game. He put up 61.5 in 40 minutes the other day. 9,100 puts him in a sub-5 value score, 4.47, but that is, competitive with some of the also-ran marks, and he's one of the upper-end players on the slate, but he does fall short of like our 1-2 kind of range, obviously way short of the 1-5. But he's at worst playable here. 9,000 on DraftKings, 8% undercut to the field. He's a 1.15 per minute player over there. No issues if you land with more Maxey. I think you're perfectly fine doing that. But I wouldn't press to get back to the field on what doesn't look like one of the top overall plays. And this is with him pulling 38 minutes. That could easily turn into 35 in reality. But he does play a lot. He averages 36.9. But if they're wiping the floor with Charlotte, you can see that come down. Terry Rozier doesn't really look like much. 6% DraftKings, 1% FanDuel, mix and match quality. Chris Middleton, again, just kind of limited by those minutes. Keeps him in check, but we are getting some shares. And if he happens to step into a couple of additional minutes, if the usage uptick helps him, I think there's reason to believe anyway. Uber 861, we did not get much on DraftKings, 4%. Pretty hard undercut to the field. On FanDuel, though, it's a big chunk, 33.3%. 6,300 shooting guard and small forward eligibility. Struggling to find what the difference that's created there. Maybe it's the small forward eligibility? I guess. Because we've got, let's see, Dort, but he doesn't really come up as far as that value score. LeVert, same thing. So, yeah, I think it's the small forward that's winning Kelly Oubre these shares because he's only a 4.36 value. He's 6,300. I was just trying to figure out why he was getting shares here across sites when he's actually, not price advantage over there. It's the position. At worst, he's interested. 0.82 per minute player on FanDuel on 18% usage. 0.92 on 22% last year was a little bit better, but could creep back up to that level against a weak opponent like Charlotte with all those pieces missing. But again, another guy who that 35 could easily turn into 32. I do think there's a little bit of fragility in the minutes for some of these Philly guys. Green and Trent, we talked about again, low end per minute dudes. It's interesting too. You do have a reasonable amount of back and forth between low end per minute guys from OKC in just their standard kind of roles versus the low end guys from Milwaukee who are some in standard minutes, some not, but everybody with a volume of shots there to potentially soak up, getting a little bit of a nudge. But it's interesting. You do technically have better. Isaiah Joe in 18 minutes is a 0.79 per minute player versus the 0.62, 0.57 that AJ Green and Gary Trent have given you. Alex Caruso's at 0.97. He's a $4,000 option versus these guys at $36. Isaiah Joe is a $3,400 option versus those guys at $36. There's a little bit of back and forth there. Nobody's really highly owned. They're just movable parts. But any one of those guys could drop into a reasonable upside lineup. And if you're chasing those shares, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility. Let's say that one of those guys outperforms one of the Milwaukee guys. And it's not totally crazy to maybe grab a few shares and bend it in that direction since we're already coming up below the field on these guys. Maybe you choose, all right, I'm going to leave that 7.3% that I was getting of both AJ Green and Gary Trent. And instead of soaking it into those guys, let me invest in 26 minutes of Cason Wallace. Let me invest in 20 minutes of Alex Caruso, 18 minutes of Isaiah Joe. Are those great players? No, but each one of those three guys is a better per minute guy than the guys from Milwaukee. So, yeah, I think there's at least some reason to explore those pivots and what that does to a lineup. If you're running a bunch of sims, you can manipulate that fairly easily. Just either you don't want to duck those guys out completely, but if you just lower projections, lower standard deviations for those guys, you should be able to replicate a scenario where these guys underperform, those guys perform at their normal levels. Sam Merrill at 41 on FanDuel. Didn't really get him. 1% on the FanDuel slate. 1 share on DraftKings at 3,600. Played 24 the other day. Put up a 14.5. Another fairly low-end per minute guy. 0.70 per minute on FanDuel. 0.72 per minute this year on DraftKings. No real love there. He and Duncan Robinson are very similar type guys. Dunk is a little bit more expensive, and I'm even less interested in Duncan Robinson. Eric Gordon does not really become relevant even with additional minutes. Strus, if he plays, not really relevant. Probably more relevant to the slate if he doesn't play because it frees up those 18 minutes to drop back into some of these other Cleveland guys. Nobody else down here is at all relevant. We didn't get any shares of any of them. I want to see what the rest of that small forward on FanDuel looks like, actually. Let's... So 82% of it's going to Bridges, but he's also got power forward. We didn't really get any of Aaron Wiggins, which I was curious about. If I give him more minutes at 3,900, we will get more of him. And he's another guy who's kind of in that mix. Except he's small forward on FanDuel, small forward, power forward on DraftKings, where we did actually get him because he's only 31. That's a really interesting price difference, actually. The reason he's noteworthy is he played above 30 minutes in their game. What was that, yesterday? I only put him at 20. That's his average for the season. He's got a number of games where he'll step in and play significantly less than that. I don't think this is completely crazy, though, because he's a decent per minute guy. 0.87 last year, 0.89 this year, 0.89 on DraftKings this year, 55.7% true shooting, 9.6% assists, 7.7% rebounding rate. Again, just in the shuffle of the Milwaukee guys and the OKC guys, Aaron Wiggins could potentially stand out. And if he plays more than 20 minutes, if he goes anywhere near that 30 plus, granted, last night he only put up a 23.9 in that 30.7 minutes, but that makes him really interesting. And even at the 20 minute that he averages for the season, he's looking very interesting on DraftKings. We got him 32% of the time. Lou Dort, again, just kind of is who he is kind of a situation, not really a part of that conversation. That's more for the cheapo value guys, the sub 4 guys. But, all right, so I was exploring the small forward before I got distracted by Wiggins there. So he only came up 6% there because it was interesting on the shares of Oubre that we got. So that's a lot of Salon. I guess it's just concentrated, but each of these guys that we're getting big concentrations on has eligibility at power forward. He's the only one that's shooting guard and small forward out of those guys, right? Power forward for 53% there, 42, 28, and then obviously 82. That's 207% of our forward shares across power forward and small forward that go to those 4 guys that share both positions. And that is a big mix. But then Oubre is our next highest owned small forward qualified guy on FanDuel. You throw him into the mix, and you're at 240% of the forward ownership, with power forward still to discuss, obviously. Just interesting how that breaks down. So that is definitely what the difference site to site in Kelly Oubre was, why we only got him 4% over here for 61 shooting guard only. That small forward eligibility is pushing him into the lineups on FanDuel. Come on. Where's the value today, Mama? That's what this entire show is about. Let's see, Mom, I disagree with that take. There's too many people that don't know the game and just talk projections. I mean, that is or is not right, and it always helps when people know the game and know what they're talking about within that. But I would talk about this blind, right? I mean, I can't actually do it, but like, I don't actually need those columns. What you're doing here is not about basketball. Outside of the abstract that is the medium in which these numbers are created. But you are here doing math. And if you think otherwise, you're just wrong. It does, of course, it helps to be able to talk about, defensive schemes, different formations and personnel in football, and everything about knowing the sport, of course, matters. And knowing the sport is what informs, being able to project minutes. Let's say being able to know who's going to step in if a guy gets hurt or it doesn't play, et cetera, et cetera. But you can literally do this show without knowing those player names because they do not matter. It's all about the numbers. It's all about this and that and that. Those are really the only three things you actually need. Minutes, price, and rate. Don't need to know who the players are. Don't need to know what team they're on. The game environment information obviously helps. That's what creates, again, the framework in which all of this exists. That does help someone win 100. That's exactly what helps someone win 100 or 50K, though, Mamba. If you're talking about betting, that's a different thing. It all exists in this same environment, but for DFS, this is what you want to focus on. Anyway. So among the forwards on DraftKings, obviously we've got a monster share of Giannis on both sides, which is great. He's the top per minute performer. He's in a situation without his wingman, who takes a significant number of shots. Giannis is already a 36% usage guy. He's a 1.68 per minute player on DraftKings. If you can get more shares of Giannis, why wouldn't you want them? So take as much as you want, take as much as you can. On both sites, he can be in every lineup that you build if you want to. And that's what the Sims are telling us. The Sims not saying you have to be at exactly 93% in 150 lineups. It's just saying, hey, this guy's really, really good today. The numbers support that he's going to be a really, really good option. And you want a ton of him, and you want to be ahead of the field. Miles Bridges, another guy just going to benefit from missing bodies in Charlotte. I've only got him at 30 minutes. It's what he's been playing in his 14 games this season. He did play 31-9, though. You could easily give him 32 minutes today. The 1.03 per minute guy, 0.99 last year, 1.07 over on DraftKings. Very solid mid-range option. 71 on FanDuel is effective. He's in 82% of our lineups. It's essentially level with the field. He is significantly popular over there at both forward spots. On DraftKings for 63, he's power forward only. So that's another player who's benefiting a little bit from some flexibility on FanDuel. But at power forward only for the cheaper price, we got him 70% of the time on DraftKings. It's a little bit of an undercut to the field on DK, but definitely a spot that you can get to quite a bit. Again, Wiggins is just kind of interesting on what those minutes look like today. At 20, he's currently a piece on DraftKings for 3,100. And there's a lot of back and forth, as I was just saying, with him and the guys from Milwaukee and with other OKC guys and the guys from Milwaukee. FanDuel only really if you see these minutes go up. If for some reason before lock we get news like expect Aaron Wiggins to play 28 minutes tonight. If you see that jump, then maybe consider it more on FanDuel. Right now, not really a critical piece on the FanDuel slate. Bobby Portis, 68, 54. Saw a nice uptick in minutes through the NBA Cup games and is a great per minute guy. But in just a 24-minute situation, kind of an is-who-he-is spot on FanDuel, and we got him 4% below the field. I could see him playing a couple additional minutes. I could definitely see him doing a little bit more out there, though. For 54 on DraftKings, we already are getting him 27% of the time, a little bit below the field. But that's a very good price for a very good 114 per minute guy, even in 24 minutes. That just works. Jimmy Butler, 28%, basically level with the field on FanDuel. 21%, basically level with the field on DraftKings. Perfectly fine. put up a monster the other day, 87.8 FanDuel points in 44.3 minutes in their last one. I think I said that he wasn't a good option that day, so I'll stop short of saying that today. Could obviously go out and do that again, but I'd like to see him try against OKC. Forget who that game was against. No issues with Jimmy on a short slate. 1.17 per minute FanDuel this year. That's an uptick from the 1.11 last year. He's not a 30% usage superstar like some of the other guys on the slate, but there's not many of those guys anyway, and he's comfortably in that next tier. But like if you're comparing Jimmy Butler and Paul George, who we got 8% of the time at 8,800, he's more expensive, small forward and shooting guard on FanDuel, 85 versus 79, same deal on DraftKings, a little bit more expensive. Positioning is the same, small forward and power forward. We got him 11% of the time. Technically, there's more shots with Paul George. 25.4% versus the 21.1 usage that Jimmy's getting. 3% difference last year. The production's not there. 113 versus Jimmy's 117. But on the days where a couple of those shots drop for Paul George where they don't normally, that's where his upside immediately catches up with Jimmy. So he's at least a reasonable consideration for some back and forth, especially if the field is closer to 10, 12% of Paul George and running away with 25% of Jimmy, especially if it starts to push up and up and up. That's one where you can shave back some Jimmy and put it into George. And you can also consider it the other way around. Since technically we are getting Paul George below the field, you could take half of these shares and sink them into more of Jimmy and take an advantage on the player who's coming up a little bit better. So there's a little bit of reasonable back and forth between those two guys who are similarly tiered players. I happen to think more of Jalen Williams in between those two players. And we got more of him, 42.6% level with the field on the FanDuel slate. On DraftKings, just 12%. He's 8,300 over there, power forward only. I think the lack of flex is probably hurting him over there. He's a 1.29 per minute DraftKings player this year, 1.30 FanDuel player. On the full slate, how many guys do we have that are above 125? There's your answer. Oh, of course I did it by... Oh, yeah, there he is. All right, so that's your list of guys who are above 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. You'll note that one of them is Kevin Love, who's projected for 13 minutes tonight and did not land in any of our lineups. If Kevin Love happened to go out there and play 22 minutes, he would be a critical piece of value. But he does not do that. He's just the backup. But we're talking about Jalen Williams being in a group that includes Giannis, SGA, Embiid, Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, and him. And that's it. If you extend it, let's go another full 10th of a point to 115. You're only adding a couple few players. You get Bam, Nick Richards. I don't think he's necessarily at the level of some of these other guys we're talking about. Tyler Hero, I agree with. Hartenstein, Darius Garland. But I mean, Jalen is very much one of the top end options on this slate. 87 is a fair price on FanDuel. 83 seems like a really good price on DraftKings. But again, I think it's the positioning since we're getting so much Giannis going through power forward, a lot of these other guys. Is there a reasonable... The $400 difference on him and Jimmy is definitely creating some of that. That would be the closest guy, I think, to be able to try and pivot into. Or you're playing with like the util spot, maybe some of those $8,100 BAM shares. If you have 200 more, you could get $8,300 Jalen. That's a reasonable back and forth there because we did get a little bit less BAM than the field. So if you wanted to take that down to 25, 28 and sink those shares into more Jalen, bring him up to the field, I think that's reasonable. But I mean, that is, again, very, very stark with who the performers are on this slate. Mobley, Izui is kind of a situation. 8,500, 22% on FanDuel below the field. He's a good per minute guy, as we just saw. He's in that group. 125 plus, 127 on FanDuel. Right at his 30-minute a night average, you don't get more of an Izui is kind of a situation than Evan Mobley when everything's there for Cleveland. So I don't really see it, but we will definitely have some. Be curious where he lands at power forward or center. Probably more at center on FanDuel. And then 10% harder undercut to the field on the DraftKings slate. Again, it's the same situation for 7,700. That's a much better price than the 85 on FanDuel. But he's just getting boxed out of shares by better options because we got money to spend on Giannis. We need to run some of these guys through those spots for value. So good player, good per minute guy, just getting a little bit edged out. But those are sometimes the guys to keep in mind. Mama, you've got it completely upside down. I'm not knocking your strategy, your approach either, buddy. But the one playing the lotto tickets is the guy not using math. That's lotto.
Coach Nurse just said it looks like Embiid will probably play, but they need to see how he feels in pregame warm-up. It's a paraphrase. Yeah, that's good. He'll, I don't know. Not a big Joel Embiid fan as far as his desire to play basketball. But he's obviously, if he's out there, he's obviously a big piece and going up against that extremely vulnerable Charlotte front court. A normal Joel Embiid, you would expect huge things, especially at the DraftKings price. We'll get to him in just a sec when we get to centers. Middleton, 6% below the field. I really, again, don't expect much with that minutes cap. And then you get like Taurean Prince, Gary Trent. Again, these are just guys who fall into that low-end per minute bucket. And we're getting odds and ends of all of those guys from Milwaukee. They're all projected around 20 and change minutes. One will step forward and play a few more minutes than the other guys and look slightly better. But everybody in that group is just kind of meh as far as like what they actually provide. So again, I would consider mixing and matching my way through some of the Isaiah Joes, the Alex Carusos of the world, certainly the Aaron Wigginses of the world on DraftKings as potential other options for those guys. And if the numbers swing back and forth as far as the ownership, then you just take that in the other direction. It's very easy. Cody Martin not really gaining ground in Charlotte despite the missing bodies. 0.84 per minute, 0.82 onesie-twosie shares on DraftKings. We did get him 20% of the time on FanDuel for 5,100. Small forward and shooting guard. I think I'd rather use those shares at one of the value spots. I don't love that $5,100 price tag on him. He's an okay per minute guy at 0.84, but he's not a huge usage guy. He's a 0.80 per minute. Last year in... Where is he? Am I losing it? Where is he? Oh, there's another page. In 261 minutes, 525 possessions this year and last year in a no LaMelo, no Brandon Miller, no Trey Mann situation that we've got pulled up on Wowie that we were looking at before for Misic. He's a 0.75 per minute player, so technically goes down in this situation over a not insignificant sample size. I really don't love it. I'll take some shares of it, but that's easily avoided and potentially a spot to consider a bigger undercut to the field. Salam, 4,000, another guy in Charlotte at that price, power forward and small forward. He's a 0.66 per minute guy. Really don't love it, but we got a ton of them because positionally and for the money, he is popping a 4.95 value score. That's technically our third best at the position on FanDuel. On DraftKings, that doesn't exist. He's a $4,500 option over there at power forward only. 4.31 value score. You got him 1% of the time. You can easily leave that on the table. Different play, site to site. Not jazzed up about the fact that I play on the site where he's looking like a piece. Is there anything I can do about that number? Man. He's on a lot. He has technically been a 1.06 per minute player in this situation, but that is across 30 minutes, not the sample that we've got on these other guys. I have him nowhere near that territory. I'm at 0.88, but 0.88 is decently high above his production so far. I might take a point or two away. That's uncomfortably high on Solana, I think. It's an undercut to the field, though. Again, the field's there. I think I'm going to flag it so that I can deal with it after the show. 7 o'clock start for our little 3-gamer tonight, so we got plenty of time to work these things out. I'm going to kick that one around a little bit. There's no sample there, so there's no reason in the world to expect a giant uptick. I think this comes down some. Outside of that, a few shares of Josh Green, which yet another really low-end per minute performer, 0.58 per minute on 12% usage. In this situation, or a reasonable facsimile thereof, 54 minutes, he's been a 0.57 per minute player. That one I totally buy. All right, center. You've got your Giannis. On FanDuel, that's going through power forward exclusively, but you do have the center option on DraftKings. You get 3 reasonably big pieces. You actually got a lot going through center on the DK slate. That's 156.67% shares going through center with 2 other guys in here at power forward eligible. And then another 90 for Giannis. So you're probably mostly getting those Giannis shares at forward, power forward, thereabouts, util. And you're getting most of these guys probably center. Oops. I want the center only guys. Yep, FanDuel, anybody who is center and power forward is going into power forward. This is 99% of your center ownership across the center only guys. 99.3. So technically there's one share out there of somebody. It's probably, actually I don't know who it is because Giannis doesn't have the eligibility. It's probably like a Mobley or an Allen that dropped in there. But primarily, if you see center and power forward on FanDuel, you can safely just click them into the power forward spot if you're hand building and use the center only guys at center. Among those guys, Bam, 22.6% on the FanDuel slate. He is a 5+ value score. Again, on a day where we're light on 5+ value scores overall, we've got several of them at center, unfortunately, on FanDuel where you can only use one of these guys. That's annoying. But Bam is definitely on that list. He's a 117 per minute player. Fell a little bit short of our initial list when we pulled up the top end performers of the overall slate, but qualified for the second list of the guys above 1.15. He's one of, 10, 12 guys on that list. So easy to get to at 81 on DraftKings. We got him 34% of the time. A little bit of an undercut to the field over there. And again, if you want to take some of those shares and sink them into Jimmy or other guys, it's reasonable. Given that they're at similar price points, I would say follow the ownership. Make sure you're building a position one way or the other. Nick Richards, 30% undercut to the field on DraftKings at 51. A more significant undercut to the field on FanDuel, 21%. He's a 5.28 value player on FanDuel. He's actually technically our biggest value of the day at the center spot on FanDuel. Kind of curious about where that ownership went. Since he's not going into center shares, there's really no driver for getting more of Bam. Outside of maybe there's just so much value that it's just easier. The Sims and optimizers are just coming up with the more expensive player. Obviously, you've got a big minutes advantage. You've got there's the same as far as the per minute this year. Big difference last year. It's a reasonable mixer. If you're looking to get different with a lineup and spend down at the center spot and then up somewhere else. I just don't know what the spend up options are, that you're really going to be chasing in combination with the Giannis that you're still going to want in that lineup. At 51 on DraftKings is kind of the same deal, 30%. He's in the mix for sure for center shares. Portis, he and Portis are very similar options on DraftKings, 51, 54. We got them about the same amount of the time. You can see the bigger value score on Nick Richards. Technically just a minute extra as far as the projection goes, but they've been similar per minute guys. Similar minutes projections. Slightly different pricing. Portis does have the MPE that pushes him a little bit. But that's a reasonable back and forth where if you see one of these guys start to get away from the field as far as ownership goes, you can safely go to the other one. Or you can move shares back and forth and build a position on one or the other. So there's Embiid. 9,500 is an aggressively good price for him on DraftKings. He's a 1.26 per minute player this year, but he was a 1.82 per minute player last year. And again, going up against Charlotte, which traditionally big men just abuse, it's a great spot. I just don't really know what you can expect. Got him at 32 minutes. Reason to believe that there's a little bit more upside beyond where he's projected. I've got him at 148. If you wanted to take him into the 1.5s, I think that's fine. Give him another. If you gave him another 3 fantasy points and just put him at 50 and change as the raw projection across sites, that takes him to 158 essentially. It's like a 1/10 of a point more than where I've got him. I think that's okay, but I also think it's aggressive considering the nature of we don't exactly know what he's going to look like. He hasn't exactly looked like himself by and large this season. It's a sinus fracture that he was out with, so it's not exactly like it's going to, hurt his conditioning or anything. I wouldn't. Well, maybe it does. Maybe it hurts his ability to breathe. I don't know. I don't love the Embiid spot, and I don't love artificially forcing more of them. 22%. You've got a nice chunk anyway. Take him 1 in 4 lineups. That's fine. You've got a nice piece against the field. And if he runs away with it, he runs away with it. I'm more interested in getting to the Giannis side of things among the superstars. I do like Hartenstein, but we're coming up 18%, 16% across sites. Perfectly fine from the mid-range, 7,400. He's a very good per minute guy. 1.24 per minute FanDuel, 1.22 per minute DraftKings. He was a 107 per minute player last year with the Knicks. He's a fantastic rebounder. He's a good facilitator for a big. 18.9% assist rate, 19% rebounding rate, 59.1% true shooting. A lot of easy buckets on offensive rebounds and putbacks. Just a good player. Happy to have a little bit more of him. If I get him around the field, if I get him like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, I think I'm okay with that. He's one that I think, this could be a little bit high as well, the ownership projection for the field, given where the value is and where the pay-ups are. I feel like Hartenstein might slip by a little bit more than what he was projected at. Or slip past the field more than that, rather, so they would have less in this clunky sentence that I'm saying. So that could become a more interesting position to have a few shares of Hartenstein. Jared Allen, mix and match him and Evan Mobley, very similar options. 78%
center and power forward for Allen, 10% below the field. Again, more shares of Evan Mobley, but a harder undercut to the field on FanDuel. And then on DraftKings, we got more shares of Allen, a gentle undercut to the field at 15%, where we got 10% of Mobley for 7,700 and a harder undercut to the field. That is a big price difference, though, on Mobley across sites, on both of them across sites, really. 78 to 67 for Allen, 85 to 77 for Mobley. But it didn't really result in too many more shares, just nicer value scores. I do think these guys both, though, are functional moving parts. If you rotate any of these guys in for any of these guys, I think that's fine. At worst, they're moving parts. Any of the, solid guys like a Mobley, like an Allen, a Hartenstein, a Bam, let's say, a Jalen Williams, any of those guys that are getting their usual 30 and change minutes that are 1 or above type players, you can go with some ownership game and try and game the slate a little bit that way and follow the sim results, but build your positions among those guys, considering those guys as somewhat similar moving parts where if the dynamics of the slate change around them, those are the guys to keep in mind, like, oh yeah, let me grab this guy because he'll be lower owned because of that against where this guy falls now. So there's a lot of swappability around this like B+ class of player and then around those like D players from Milwaukee and OKC. It's a really interesting slate that way. Outside of those guys, really nobody else is at all relevant. We already said Brolo, but 31% of him. He's a 5.24 value score on FanDuel for 5,300. I could definitely see that succeeding. 0.85 per minute this year, was a 0.95 per minute player last year. Again, no Dame, so there'll be a couple extra shots for him to take if he wants them. I never mind getting to Brook Lopez, but it's really not a great spot going up against Cleveland. So there is that downside to it. They're 9-point dogs without Dame. That is the game with the highest total of the night, but it's only 221.5, and it could get awfully grindy with the bigs for Cleveland there. So I don't love that spot. And we really didn't get it on DraftKings, so you don't have to worry. Andre Drummond not looking like a piece on either slate. He's at 63 and 6,000 and doesn't have the minutes that he would require at that price. Nobody else. Again, Love is a fantastic per minute guy, but just doesn't see any minutes. Yabusele regulated to backup minutes. Diabate could get interesting if Charlotte goes in that direction. Just as far as trying to get bodies, if he ends up picking up starters run and jumping into the 20s for minutes, 3,900, 3,200 across sites, most specifically here, he could jump into this kind of territory, maybe even a little bit higher. But I don't know that he becomes value of the day. We've kind of already got that in other spots that we already know about. But maybe at least a name to keep in mind, just double check him late as far as the projection, the minutes, etc. Watch Embiid play tonight against Charlotte and sit tomorrow because it's Cleveland. Yeah, as Mamba points out, he said before the season that he's never going to play a back-to-back in his career again, ever, which is yikes. But yeah, you would like to think that they would do it the way that Power's saying, where he would sit against the garbage team that's missing all their good players and then play against Cleveland in a interesting Eastern Conference game. Fading Giannis on FanDuel will land on him on DK. And I think you go with Giannis on both sites. But that's me. Who are you going with instead? Let's put it that way. Because you got money to spend. Yeah, Power, I don't have Nick Smith and KJ Simpson currently projected. I have them in the G League right now. I've seen them projected at other sites today. But I believe that they're with the G League team, as you correctly point out. That gets confusing sometimes because the way they list them on the injury reports, it'll say questionable, probable, and then with the G League team. And I think other sites either don't check that or misread that as he's probable to play with the big club, and I don't think that's what they're actually reporting.
But it's always, one to watch. Fortunately, kind of low-end options either way. But I think that rounds things out, guys. Let me punch out of here. We're coming up 5:51. Went up over an hour. It's pretty much going to function like a center, so I can get 3 pretty much with the utility. I think I missed something, man. You were talking about Giannis. You're going to land on him on DK. I get that. What are you going to instead of Giannis on FanDuel? Was what I was curious about. Because again, it's a pretty big share of Giannis to be walking away from when he came up nearly 95% of the time in our top 150 across Sims. Favorite value on DK Mamba is Micic. He's in 96% of the lineups for 4,000. You've also got Seth Curry there. It's just all these dirt cheap options like Delon Wright, Seth Curry, Micic. Pick your poison between those 3. If you've got to lean on one of those 3, that's maybe where your lean comes in, right? They all math out great, but the top guy right now is looking like Micic. Again, I've got him significantly below the number that he's put up in this situation over the past year plus, but that number is still higher than what his per minute production for this season looks like. So if you get him just coming out and playing at his 0.74 FanDuel, 0.80 DraftKings, he'll fall short of these marks, but fortunately that still means let's say he comes out and puts up just his 0.80. It becomes it's still a 6.38 value score. Even if he just plays this change situation in a is who he is kind of a style. And we've got at least a little bit of history that says he's a 1+ per minute player in this situation. But again, that's not what we gave him. I got to get him back to where I had him. There we go. So I've got him right in between. And he looks great. Curry, it's just about minutes. He's 3,000 dead men. Played 31-8 in a bit of a surprise last night. I put him at 28. I might take it away before the slate starts. Keep an eye on it. He's probably my least favorite from that group because I think it's more realistic for Delon Wright, and I also think Delon Wright a little bit better overall as a per-minute performer based on 0.91 versus 0.71 last year. They're at 0.63 and 0.69 respectively this year. But I do think Delon Wright is the slightly better player. The best individual attribute between the two is Seth Curry's three-point shooting ability, obviously. But yeah, I think I would lean a little bit more, even though we're getting more. And this is where you start, picking up again, going back to that conversation, Mamba. For one, you note that 6.71, we've got a better value score technically on Delon Wright, even though we got a little bit less of him in that sim result. And it's probably because of the positioning, point guard, shooting guard. But if we're talking about just the guard spot, then obviously it's the same conversation. So that's where you can get into a little bit of, the basketball of it, right? But there's always going to be the numbers supporting whatever the basketball thing that you're talking about is. The numbers are behind that anyway, right? So you can, as much as you want to peel it back to just like Delon Wright's better at basketball. Okay, I agree. That creates these numbers that I just referenced for last year. Right. But that is where you're, the dynamics, the conversational dynamics of, deciding between if I've got an open guard spot and only 3,000 left, do I go Seth Curry or Delon Wright? That's where, I think those things come into play a little bit more. And for me, it's Delon Wright a little bit stronger than Seth Curry, especially with the fragility of minutes on Curry. This is also another one. I mentioned it before. And again, I only got him at 20, Aaron Wiggins. And he's already showing pretty good amount of value at 3,100 on DraftKings. Not really at all on FanDuel. We're below the field. He's 6% over there. But he played 30.7 in their last game, and he's an okay per minute guy as compared to all these other 0.63s, 0.65s, 0.71s, and so on and so forth. He's the guy who's actually kind of the most interesting out of that group. It's just, I don't want to just come out and give him like 28, 30 minutes like I did with Seth Curry, because there's no real situational change there. It was just kind of a little bit random. But if you were to give him those minutes, he would be right up here with these guys. So he's at least somebody to keep in mind, but I really don't know what that minute situation is going to look like. So I didn't want to project it, because it's not like the Charlotte situation where there's just everybody's out, so these guys have to play. Wiggins could easily play 16 minutes tonight, 18 minutes tonight. Strus to debut and kill Cleveland's second team upside, says Power. Yeah, I agree with that. Had him in, but now there's a little bit of like that group of guys. Where how do those minutes actually shake out? You can throw LeVert into that bucket as well. Fortunately, FanDuel, we weren't really getting any of those guys. We're getting a little bit on DraftKings, mostly on Karis LeVert, who would be, I would think, out of that group, the safest. But with just a little bit, 2-3 minutes go from here to here, and it's got a pretty big impact on a guy like that. I think it's safe to kind of just shake off any real interest in any of those guys outside of just, I got a share of them here, I got a share of them there. But none of those guys are going to look really good now. It's just mostly about the top four. Coming up on 6 o'clock, Power says for $148 million, I say get your fat ass out there whenever I say so. With a little bit of a less strict tone maybe, but yeah. I'm more inclined towards you should be able to play more than one basketball game a week and so on and so forth. Look, if you're legit hurt, but I don't know. Javier says, late today, who's playing the minutes that Misic doesn't play? It's a little bit of a mix between these guys down here. Isaiah Wong, Daquan Jeffries gets a couple. Cody Martin's got some. But for Charlotte, I'm really just considering these top guys where I know there's some security minutes. Salon's going to come down a little bit again on FanDuel, I think. I really don't like where we landed aggressively on him. But yeah, I really think that the guys you want to focus on are your more realistic options. You don't need to go fishing even on a 3-gamer on a team like this. And like even Josh Green across 30 minutes is such a bad per minute guy. Even amongst all the bad per minute guys, he falls way short of everybody else. But Misic up top, Bridges, obviously, they're in just most of all lineups across both sites. I do think that Curry, unless something changes, there's that reasonable expectation of minutes there, so that partially answers your question. We saw him start yesterday and play 31.8 minutes. And that was next to LaMelo. You guys like Wong? But, do you think we're getting any kind of minutes? It's been a .94 per minute player. I'll give him that. 22.2% assist rate on the season. Double-digit rebounding rate is always nice. That's across 5 games, 15.5 minutes a night. If they gave him 16 minutes, I don't think there's anything there. I suppose I could give him a little bit more of rate. Like if I give him that, put him like right at his number, puts him at a 12. I think you would have to have expectations of 20 plus minutes probably. It's not out of the question. But I just think if he gets those minutes, he gets himself more, kind of closer to the conversation with all those OKC guys and Milwaukee guys that we already know are going to be playing those minutes, right? So I don't know. I really don't love it. Yeah, Javier, we mentioned KJ Simpson before. Pretty sure he's in the G League. Simpson and whoever the other guy was. Nick Smith. Pretty sure they're both with the G League. Those would be answers to that question if they are with the team, but I believe they're with the G League. Anyway, let me go sort some of this stuff out. If I'll search that out and I'll see if I can verify one way or the other. And if you see them pop into the board, then they'll be there. That's why I like Wong. Yeah. Again, I don't think you're necessarily wrong because the per minute production's been fine. I just question what the minutes actually look like. And even if he does get them, doesn't it just probably put him back into like, I think it gets him into like, this kind of territory with a lot of these guys. Granted, he is, again, a better per minute guy than a lot of these dudes. But it gets him into like Aaron Wiggins territory maybe. And he's at a different price point, so probably not on where it matters on DraftKings. Gets him into like Isaiah Joe, Alex Caruso territory. These are the guys. These are the best comps. Alex Caruso is almost a perfect comp. He's at 20 minutes, 4,500.97, so the production is there. Brolo's a center, so it's different, but it would put him like on this kind of a tier. Right, that's an 18-minute guy, a 20-minute guy, and a 26-minute guy, so it covers the entire range of what his ceiling for minutes would look like. And not one of these guys is overly relevant at a range of per-minute production. So I think that's the best it vaults him up to. Power's got him 18 minutes. It's a worthy discussion. They need bodies. But that's so 4 more minutes for the $4,000 shooting guard and $3,400 point guard on DraftKings. Again, I think you're putting him right in this territory. That is an 18-minute Isaiah Joe at 0.79, and he's not really that relevant. If you get a couple of shares, fine, but I don't know that I would soak like my one big lineup. I don't know that I would drop those shares into that one. Because even if he does get the uptick in minutes, we're probably just dealing with one of these options. He would become a reasonable swap, reasonable comp for one of these guys. But I think I'd rather have a cheaper AJ Green, a cheaper Gary Trent, Isaiah Joe. If you get him starting or something like that, totally different story, obviously. Anyway, 6:04. Let me actually punch out this time. I've said that a couple times already. You guys absolutely rock. Football projections for tomorrow's slate. 2-gamer tomorrow going up tonight. Right on the heels of that one, the main slate projections will be up tonight, as will the rankings. I'll start up on the groups article, the shell of that, get that done over the next 12 hours or so. So you'll have that probably tomorrow morning, early afternoon. All through the weekend, we'll be here as far as projections, content, all of that usual stuff. Rotoscouts.com. Everything is under $1 a day for access to all of it. NBA, NFL, and NHL going on right now. MLB coming back sooner than later. Under 100 days till opening day. Can't wait. The argument is fewer bodies missing 2 people to the G League Invitational. Yeah, no, power. I mean, that's why we're here on Charlotte overall. Is the missing bodies. So yeah, that's 40. But my point with him that I was just making, hopefully illustrated well, is that if you give him those additional minutes, I still don't know that he becomes a critical piece. But anyway, this has been the hell's his name? Isaiah Wong Show. And so I was hoping you said Wiggins because I'm scoring 16 points because Miami doesn't defend forwards at the 3-point line. There you go. I'm just interested in that uptick in minutes that he played, but yeah, so much the better, Mamba. I like that call out. Yeah, that's it, Javier. It's just the fact that I don't think he's gonna get enough runway to blow past all of that other group of guys. But he would be in that race, Rather than running off on some side track, he would be at least on the main track running around the same loop as those other guys. With that in mind, guys, have great weekends. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll see you real soon.